Okay, so we'll get started. So yeah, we're here today to talk about using AI to keep Figma in sync with Storybook. If you juggle Figma, Storybook, and a design system, you've probably kind of felt the pain of version drift, where Figma doesn't quite match your components, which doesn't quite match your designs, which doesn't quite match your Storybook. So today we're going to try and fix that with AI. I'm Chris. I'm a customer engineer builder, and I'm going to be guiding you through today's session. It's going to be live and interactive, so feel free to jot questions in the Q&A tab. There's kind of the chat tab in Zoom, and then there's also a separate Q&A tab. If you put the questions in there, I'll be able to see them, and I'll answer them as we go through. And then also at the end, we'll have a dedicated time for Q&A. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, the recording will be shared after the event. So what we're covering today, we're going to be building a new component and story from a Figma design. We're going to apply an updated design from Figma to an existing component in Storybook. We're going to create a brand new component set based on your existing design system, but with no existing design. And we're going to generate theme-specific versions of existing components within Storybook. So the big problem we're seeing is this handoff bottleneck between the sort of designers, developers, where even with Storybook and the best of intentions, designs and codes just diverge. Documentation becomes redundant and ownership becomes somewhat blurred. And whether it's the code has kind of got ahead of the design or the design's been updated and the code update to that design is still like a few sprints away, it's hard to keep things up to date. The problems this brings about is that yesterday's stories no longer match today's components. So you have an out-of-date storybook, which means that you have missing documentation or incorrect documentation. There's depreciated props in the storybook, which aren't no longer in the components, which means that tests can fail or tokens aren't being applied. And you have this storybook, which is this kind of great repository of components and documentation, but it no longer is meaningful or up to date. We believe we can solve this with Fusion, which is Builder's visual development platform. It's an AI tool you can use. And you can take components, well, among many things, you can take components straight from Figma to Storybook without the need for a sprint. This can be technical or non-technical folk who can do this. You can roll out visual updates across all of your components. And you can create new components, functionality, and stories within Storybook, among many other things. The best kind of way to show you this, I guess, is just to show you live. So I'm going to just jump into a demo. Just going to move some things around. Okay, so what I've got here is Fusion. This kind of around the outside might be familiar if you've used it, but this is Builder's Fusion tool. What I've got here is the application that I've got running within Fusion. So this is a Storybook application, as you can see. And I've got the kind of beginnings of a design system here. So I've got some components. I've got an accordion, I've got a button, I've got a card, form, and a toast component. And then what I have Figma designs, and then I have another application running, which I'll show you in a minute. But if I start here, we've got this design system we started to build. We've got a few components already. Some of them, though, are already out of date. So we've got a button here that no longer matches the designs. That's an old design, and we want to update it. You can kind of see in our form component, it's using a different style button. This is the new one we want to use. So if I jump to my button, I have a Figma design that one of our designers has done for a new set of buttons. So this is the design we should be using, and the one I have in the application is the old one. So within Figma, if I click on a layer and then right-click and go down to plugins, I've got it installed already, but if you don't, you can go to manage plugins and just search for Builder.io. But if you have it already, you see it just there in recents. Builder.io, click on that. The plugin will open. And you'll see a little preview of what you have selected. This could obviously be anything. I could select different layers. In this case, I'm going to grab the whole button set and click Smart Export. What this is going to do is basically pass the Figma design, analyze it, and turn it into basically a state or code that Fusion can understand. So that's taking into account the different layers, the different designs, the different variables. And we're going to export that, which is now copied, and put it inside of Fusion. So I'm going to paste that in just there. And what you see is a little preview of your design, as well as this little chip saying that it's a Figma design I've pulled in. And what I'm going to say is that I have an updated design to my button component. And at that point, with the context we're giving it with the Figma, that's really all we need to do. It takes kind of an agentic approach, and it will start different tasks, doing different things. So it's going to like have a phase of thinking at the beginning where it looks through what I provided. So you can see it's kind of analyzing the Figma design. It's found the primary button, secondary button, external, and it obviously can just see what we see. And then it's going to think about what it needs to do next. So it needs to see if we've got an existing button component. You can see here the tools that have been launched. It's read our existing code base. It's found that we have a button component. It's found the styling for it and the story for it. And you can see it's starting to write code already. I'll leave that running for a moment. And it looks like we've got a couple of questions. Storybook a plugin. Storybook is like a service you can use. You can install it as a standalone application, or you can install it within your own application. And they have like a CLI command you can run that just creates it. There's like a certain format you need to follow where you have your components and you create stories for each one. And it will basically provide this UI. Like you don't have to build this UI, you just create stories for your components and it will create all of this. But it's a great way of organizing and documenting your component sets. This preview here gets hot reloaded as stuff's happening. So while it's writing code, it's obviously midway through writing a file. It might just look a bit broken for a second. While that's running though, I will jump over to another one, just so we don't have to just wait for the AI to do its thing. So this is a sort of a custom design system, I guess. I just built these components. Here, just to show you can use with any kind of scale, I've got Material UI, obviously Google's open source design system. And I've got a bunch of components here. They're just standard ones you've probably seen a million times before. Cards and checkboxes and buttons and stuff. What I'm going to do here is, instead of taking a Figma design and giving it to Fusion, I'm just going to ask Fusion to do some designing itself. So we have these existing components, and I'm going to ask it to create a new component, basically. So I want a new product card component. Please use our existing design system and components where it makes sense. Card, button, etc. That last bit I didn't need to do, but kind of a best practice really is to provide all the context that you might want if you were doing it to the AI. It's going to analyze the code base, and it will probably infer, well, it should infer that we have this design system in place. We have a button component already. If it's going to create a product card that has a button, it's going to use your existing button. But there really is no harm in just mentioning it if it's something that you would have thought about if you were going through the process yourself. And again, you can see, look, it's found existing cards, existing stories, and it's starting to write that code. Looks like there's a couple more questions. The question is, does Builder tie into existing CSS variables? Yes, so you connect your repository, that can be GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, or Azure, to Builder, and then you can open the repository or a branch of the repository within Fusion. What that will do if you do it for the web UI is it will create basically a clone of that branch. Clone that repository, and then you create a new branch of that, and that basically runs here within a container. That means it has obviously context of your whole code base. So it will understand the CSS variables, it will understand the components you have, the designs. In this case, I'm actually running the code locally. So I've got my code base locally, and I've used our CLI to launch Fusion in the browser based on that local code base. So if these changes are made, I could go to my IDE and have a look and see the code that it had written. If you were running it in the UI, though, you would see basically a send PR button here. So I do this change, I make this product card or whatever it is, and then I can click send PR and push that code or push the PR to back to your repository again, where your build processes can run, your developers can review it, and it can get deployed. Okay, it looks like this one's finished up. So if I have a look, there's an error. That I believe is just to do with how I've set it up, so I can just ignore that. And it has created somewhere a product card. There we go. Okay, awesome. So you can see it's created a brand new component from scratch. This product card, it's matching the existing design, which is obviously the Material UI design. And if I look at the code, so there's this interact tab, which is where we were, which means you can kind of you actually click around like at the website. Then there's a code tab. Sorry, I clicked back on interacting code. You can see what files are changed and your whole kind of code base. So Storybook, source, components, product card. And you can see it's used our existing components. So it's pulled in, it's obviously recognized we have Material UI, it's pulled in the different components it needs. And it's using those rather than like making up new things each time. This isn't like a brand new component it needed to make. It's kind of pieced together the parts we already had. Some of these are in Storybook, so basically in this repository. Some of them aren't already. So it's obviously found those from Material UI and imported them. A good idea after this might be to then import those into Storybook, sorry. So you have them all kind of documented and in here. If I scroll down and have a look, yeah, you can see it's used card and the different props. It's used box, card media, chip. There's not really any like just divs or like hacky stuff here. It's kind of all using your design system and your components. If I head back here, it's made a bunch of different variants. So like there's an on sale one, out of stock, without an image. So it's kind of taken a bit of, I only asked it to create a product card. It's taken a bit of license and created a whole bunch of different variants that would make sense really. If I head back to the first one I started off, which was that button update. So if you remember, I took that design from Figma, exported it, and then asked it to update my button. So it looks like it's done that. It's picked up the primary, secondary, external, icon, success. So it's picked all these and brought the design straight in. So that went from an outdated design basically to an updated one with a lot of different variants in like a minute or two. You can imagine how you could do this for all of your components or even for like a wider design overhaul. So I'm just seeing lots of questions coming. So the question is, what is the output? Story files or full component variants ready to be used in name design? So that's a really good question. It's both basically. So that product card, that's a brand new component, which meant that it had to create a new component, which is obviously done in the components file. And then it also, because this is Storybook, it had to create a new story for it as well. So product card.stories. And then this is the kind of layout of a standard Storybook story. So it's created this, all the different variants and the different input options. But certainly the component, the Storybook is so you can visualize it in story. The story is so you can visualize it in Storybook, sorry. But the component here, you could just send PR now and start using that product card in your application. Great. So this brings me on to here I've used Material UI as I mentioned. I've just imported it as an npm package, and I've imported a few of the components into this library. Obviously, it has quite good context of Material UI because it's quite common. But if this is your existing component library, then a really good thing to do, which I guess is similar to Storybook, would be our component indexing. So we have this enterprise feature, which is component indexing. Basically, you run a CLI command, and we have this AI agent that will run through all of your components and your whole code base, and it will basically create AI understandable documentation for each component. If you were here in last time, Josh demoed this for everyone. But it's a really powerful feature because it means that instead of just passing in just the code, which AI can obviously understand, but there's a lot to go over. It kind of summarizes down to these bite-sized, understandable bits that's really effective when passed into AI. So a kind of a really powerful thing to do would be to take your design system or your component library, run component indexing on it. Those components don't even need to be necessarily in the repository you're then using going forward. But it means you can then use them going forward really easily with Fusion. If I go on to next, sorry, there's a bunch more questions. So the question, would it also pick up color tokens and tailwind classes such as fonts, spacing, etc.? So that's a really good question. Yes, basically, it's kind of built to act as one of your developers. if there's example code or any other code in your repository, it's going to use that as kind of inspiration. If it picks up the fact that you're using Tailwind, it's going to use Tailwind. If you're using a different like design system or CSS framework, it's going to realize that and use that going forward. It's not going to kind of go off track and use like JSX or whatever, or like CSS inline if you're using some sort of like a class-based system or whatever. Again, with importing or exporting, sorry, from Figma, it will pick up those variables there as well and use those colors in your designs. So really, I've kind of shown how to, I guess, update an existing component and how to create a brand new one from within Fusion. But a cool thing is to create components from Figma. So this is obviously something that's a pretty common thing you're going to do. So I've got this alert component that we don't have yet. I'm just going to grab that whole layer. Again, that's right-click, plugins, build.io, and then you can see a little preview of it, Smart Export. And I'm going to go into this one, paste that in, and say I want a new alert component. And again, I'll just mention use my existing designs and components. Big spell, card, button, etc. Where it makes sense. This is kind of almost a personal style, but I prefer to give it the extra context if it helps. Right, while it's kind of working on that, I can kind of, there was a good question about color, so I'm kind of show a good example of that, I guess. And also how you can give different context and different inputs to the AI. So what I've done is I've gone to the Builder website, which you can see here. And you see how it started. It's kind of in dark mode. It's got black background. We've got these like purple highlights and purple buttons. We've got a few like blue highlights, some like orange ones further down. And then I've basically just used an online tool just to extract the color scheme. So what I've got here is the colors we use basically. Their hex values and the actual color palettes. And I'm just going to screenshot that. So this isn't like exporting to Figma, it's just going to be an image. Screenshot, go back into Fusion, drag that screenshot in. So all that is just a PNG image. And I'm going to say, this is the color scheme of our site. And I'll give it a bit of context because those colors alone are pretty meaningless. The black is the background. The purple is the primary button color. And the other colors are highlights. Can you update the product card component to use our brand colors? So I could also say, can you update all of our components to use our new, maybe you're doing a redesign or a tweak or whatever, and you have a new color scheme, or you're starting like I am with Material UI, but you don't necessarily want to use the white and blue standard stuff that you see everywhere. And so in this case, I've pulled in the PNG, but this could be like a PDF or really like a markdown file or any other kind of file. It's just a way of providing context, in this case, visual context to the AI. You can see it's kind of already starting to kick that off. If I hop back over here, this should be finished now. I'm trying to remember what I asked. Oh yeah, alert component. So I created an alert component. Here you go. That's pulled over from our Figma design. Looks like it's pretty good, but I don't think it's pulled the font and the background. So we've got success, warning. It's using, that's definitely our button and our icons, and that's definitely our card, but it might not necessarily be the font. Oh no, it is now. So yeah, that's pretty good. Obviously, I could now like tweak this. I could type in a prompt here. I could also, I've shown you the code and interact, but I could go to design, which opens like a Figma-esque design tool. This is also quite familiar if you use Builder Publish as well. And I could sort of select elements of it. Maybe I select there. And I want to maybe add some more padding to the top, padding to the bottom, and make small design changes. And then I hit enter, and the AI would apply those changes. It would obviously, I've done this as a success one, but it would apply it across the board to the rest of the component set. While that's running, oh no, I'll leave that. And design mode. There you go. Oh, that's done already. So yeah, I just took like 2 seconds to do that because it was a quick thing. Um, if I look at the edit, you can see it's just literally made a surgical kind of change. It's only really changed what needed to be done. It's not like rewritten the whole file or changed the way the component's built. It's just changed some CSS. In this case, I made a bit of a weird change, 9 and 11. It's just like changed the CSS for it. But if I was using Tailwind or whatever, it would use obviously the correct class to do that change. Um, there's a whole bunch of questions. So it's a good question here. Will it work to create components in Storybook from Figma if we don't have anything built in Storybook yet and be coded how our devs would code it? So that's a good question. So if your Storybook is obviously can be a standalone repo or it can be within your larger application. Um, if you want it to code the way your devs would code it, then it needs to have examples. Obviously, it needs to know how your devs would code it. So there's 2 ways of doing it. If Storybook was a standalone repo, when you set that up and connect that to Builder, you could basically add an additional repo, which is you're connecting a second repo for reference, basically. So you could connect your component or your design system repository as the additional one, so the AI knows about that, but it's not going to make changes there. And then have the Storybook repo as the one it actually makes changes to. If that was the case, then yes, you absolutely could. You could say import my button component and create a story for it and documentation, and it would import it from the reference one and bring it into Storybook. Obviously, if Storybook wasn't a standalone, if it was part of your repository, and so the components were right there in the code already, but they just weren't necessarily imported and didn't have stories created, then even better, you just say, create a story for my button component, create a story for my card component, and it can do that obviously right away. If I go, show me what changes I'm making. Oh, the color schemes. Um, let's move this that way, shall we? So yeah, it's those colors I passed in. You remember when purple, blue, green, black, the kind of builder kind of colors. It's done that. It's applied it to our material UI component. So that's a bit of like a blur animation when you hover over it. It's using that blue highlight, purple button, purple button. So this is quite a simple example, but obviously it's showing how I could just take like a color scheme or a brand like swatch and pass it in as an image and get it to apply it to an existing component. Kind of speaking of colors, kind of leads me to a good example. Is we head over here, and you see we've got my accordion and stuff. If we go into Figma, these are the components that I imported initially, but we actually have a bunch more components that our designers did, which are in dark mode. So I'm going to grab accordion, alert, buttons, because we've got those through already, and export those. Again, you can like sorry, not widgets, plugins. You can multi-select with the plugin. So you've seen me so far just select one layer, but here I've got 3 different ones. It'll export all of those. You can select as many as you want. And it will bring those over to Fusion as separate layers. So it obviously understands their separate things. I'll smart export. And I'm going to paste it in here. And I'm going to say, no, on cue with dark mode, my lights got off. There we go. Come on. There we go. I'm going to say, I want to create a storybook theme for light and dark mode and update my components to be able to toggle between the two. Here are some of our dark mode designs for reference. So here I've only got a few components and I've just provided a few examples. You could do this across obviously a wider code base. And obviously Storybook has this, if you've used it before, has this kind of powerful theming feature. It's basically just CSS variables, but you can create different themes, in this case dark and light, but there could be a whole different bunch of different ones. And it allows you to kind of visually toggle your components between those. And so it's a really powerful way of visualizing it. And Fusion obviously is a really powerful way of updating that, which would be quite a long-winded manual process to like change all your components over to dark mode or light mode. And the Storybook, sorry, Fusion should do it pretty quickly. While I'm waiting for that one, I'll go over some questions. So there's a good question here. Would it also pick up on these classes if they are not translated one-to-one in Figma variants? I'm assuming this kind of means the like your Figma color variants or CSS variants or even variants here for buttons or whatever aren't named, I guess, one-to-one with your code base. If that's the case, then that's somewhere that component indexing would come in really handy. It would obviously kind of make I guess, like a best guess. But if you had indexed your components beforehand, then the AI would have like the best context to use for that. So it would know that you have buttons and they're used for this case and this case, and maybe they come in this many different types. And even if maybe the wording isn't exact between the two, it would probably be able to infer that's what you want to do. Um, so yeah, this is a good question. If specific spacing variables are set in your design system, will the changes made in design mode override those existing variables since pixel amounts are being selected in the right panel? So that was me playing around and changing like a small tweak in a weird amount. In that case, no, as you saw, it just used a CSS override. It wasn't going to go in and change it, which would then change everything else. If I made that change and then I hit enter and just let the AI make that change. If I provided a bit more context, then it could do that if you wanted it to. So, maybe I made that change and then said, I want more spacing or this amount of spacing across all my components, or like we're currently using padding of 4 each side. I want 8, do it everywhere. Then it could obviously change those CSS variables if the repository is connected. But in that case, it took it to mean just like a one-off change, and it just did it in CSS. My head over here looks like this is still going. So again, you can see it creates this to-do list when there's a lot of jobs, when there's a lot of like items to cover, and you can kind of just see it slowly ticking through them all. And a good kind of tip is that this all looks like it's going well, but maybe it's not, or maybe you forgot to mention something, or you change your mind and you want to make a change. At any point, you can always just hit stop, give it some more context, type in a different message, like say undo that last bit and do this instead, and hit enter, and it will kind of restart where it picked up. It won't it's not going to just stop and delete this whole thing and then start from scratch. It's kind of has the context of what it did before. And kind of speaking of undo, actually, if I head back up a bit, you can see this is the last message I sent. Before each message, you've got this kind of restore to this point button. So anyway, you can go and click that, and that will basically roll back the changes. Like each change is kind of under the hood, is kind of like a commit, basically like a granular commit. And so at any point you can just restore and basically roll back to a certain point. This is really powerful if you're just playing around and maybe it's not necessarily worked or you don't like how it came out. You can kind of restore to this point and then just do it again, and it's kind of nothing lost. You've also got the history tab, which shows all the chats in like a more condensed version, so you can go back easier. And this kind of bookmark button. So maybe we're really happy with the state right now, but I'm going to maybe experiment a little bit. So I'm going to bookmark it, make a bunch of changes. No, they didn't work out properly. I'm going to go back to history or find the bookmark or whatever and restore to that point. Looks like this is still going along, so I'll look at some questions. Oh, that's a good question. Does it handle the documentation too for Storybook? So I'll go into this one just so I don't mess around with that one. You can see I've got all of these with this docs card. This is basically, if you don't know, a feature of Storybook where you can have documentation for each component. Storybook out of the box has this auto docs feature. So it's basically all of this is kind of done automatically. It's realized all these components exist and it kind of pulls them in. You obviously set up the different inputs and stuff in your stories file. but this stuff at the top, I think it's just like a one-liner you put in to say this. But you could have like a separate markdown file, which would display just here with much more comprehensive documentation. It can absolutely do that, yes. If you had one already, that'd be great for an example. But it will understand how Storybook works. So you could say, create more comprehensive documentation for product card, and how the different, or like when to use the different states or different variants. And it could write a markdown file, look it into Storybook, and display it here. So yeah, it's very powerful for not only writing the code, but also it can do the documentation part. If I head back over here, it looks like this should be finished in a sec. Okay, interestingly, it's done everything I asked it to, and then it's also creating a showcase story that demonstrates all the components in one place with theme switching. That's pretty cool, especially for like light and dark mode. You might want to see all of them in one go, and then toggle between the two. That should be done in a second. If I look at Q&A, good question. Are the restore points retained if you close the browser? So yes, they are. I am using I've running this code locally, and then I've used our CLI to launch Fusion in the browser. So you can kind of see in the URL, it's like local edit, local host, and then like it's using my local code. Once I close this, and if I leave the CLI still running, then I open it up again, then they'll be maintained. If I like once I close that CLI, like running any kind of CLI commands and stuff, but then it'll be gone. If you're using it in the browser, like most people do, then you would connect your repo, create a new branch, make your changes. It looks like something's broken here. In a second, I'll tell it that it's broken. Let's just try refreshing. Okay, it's realized an error has happened. And someone actually asked about credits. It's realized an error has happened and said this response was free, no credits were used. It often does that if like an error happens, or it fixes an error that it made itself. Let's just grab some of this. I mean, it has context of all this anyway, but actually, tell you what, I'll grab this stuff. And I'll say, I'm getting an error. Sorry, the restore points. Yeah, so if you'd launched it in the browser, so you'd connected your repository, that then creates a project, and then you create a branch from that project, and you start making changes in Builder, in Fusion. Yes, that as long as anytime you go back to that branch, all the history will still be there. Even if you send a PR, you can then later go back to that branch and update that PR, and roll back to different points. It's when you're working locally, it's a little bit different. But yeah, no, restore points do persist. See if there's any more questions while I wait for that part. This question here: can I use Storybook for maintaining projects? So Storybook as like a function is typically for I guess maintaining your design system and maintaining your documentation and components. So you have your project, you have your components, and you want to basically document them, and display them so that people know how to use them and stuff. That's what Storybook's typically for. But you can absolutely use it for maintaining your your design system. Um, I'm not seeing. Let's see what's actually happened here. It doesn't look like dark mode has been applied. I think that's how it's done it. I'm not seeing anything up there, so let's just tell it that. Not seeing a light or dark mode toggle in Storybook. I actually did this already in this one, so while that's running, I'll just pop over here anyway and show you. That one I've just created, so it might not work. Go button. what I should be seeing is basically this theme toggle. So if I go to the default, click on that, go dark, the button doesn't actually change in this instance. Maybe the card might. Yeah. So this is what it should be doing. Is basically creating like a light and dark mode variant of each component, and so you can then just like toggle between the two. Um, and you could do that across like your whole component set if you wanted to in some prompts. Okay, I'm now seeing it here, so hopefully we're in the right track. You can see it's restarted dev server, so it can run like bash commands um, and like install npm packages or like restart the server or run tests or anything like that. So it's really powerful what Fusion can do. When running it like locally like this, you can like whitelist what commands can and can't be run. You might not necessarily want it to like remove folders or whatever. So you can kind of whitelist which ones you can do. So if I check this out, it looks like it's finished up. I go and look at my button. There we go. We've got light and dark mode. If we go to this, I guess theme showcase, that should show all of them in one go. Oh, that's the close message. It's not actually an error. Got light and dark mode. Dark. We scroll down. Looks like it's updated these, made them a bit different. The cards, it's given an outline to. Changed like inverted the button styles and stuff. So that's kind of really a powerful way to do that. There's a whole bunch of questions. I'll do one more. I'll set one more prompt going, and I'll have a look at some questions. So one more thing to show you is I created a brand new component, like within Fusion. I created one using Figma design, but I could create another one. Let's maybe grab this slider. I won't mention how I'm doing this again, but build a plugin, Smart Export. Jump in here, paste that in, and say I want a slider component with dark and light mode. So now that I've got dark and light mode set up, I'm going to ask it to create that from the off with both different variants. I'm only giving the dark mode design, but obviously it will infer what the light mode one will look like based on the existing components we have. Right, while that runs, I will jump into the Q&A because there's a whole bunch of questions. So this is a really interesting question. On a more general note, how do you envision the combination of Storybook and Builder within current workflows like handoffs between designers and developers? So we've been talking to people about this, and we've seen a whole bunch of different, I guess, scenarios. One really intriguing one is using Fusion to do designs or to tweak designs. So it's either like a minor thing, or it's a component that was created just by the developers, or it didn't ever have a Figma design. Instead of, I guess, taking that code and making a Figma design, so you can then tweak it and then tell the developers to make the change back again. You could just come straight into Fusion, either go into that design tab if you want to, or we have a lot of like designers and product managers internally who have maybe features they wanted to add to actually Builder, the web app, or like design changes, and they just go into Fusion, load up the Builder web application within Fusion, and then just tell it to make the change. So they could say, change the button, change the style, add this new like sign up form, whatever it is they want to do. And so we're finding a lot more designers and product managers who've like never written a line of code, and still never have to actually, coming into Fusion, making changes and sending PRs and actually like getting stuff shipped. So it's kind of tightening that handoff a lot to the point that sometimes there isn't even a handoff. It's like a collaboration. In terms of um, like using Storybook, it's a similar story, I guess. You could easily come into Storybook, create a whole bunch more components, and then send the PR, let the developers review them. Obviously, once you send the PR and it goes into GitHub or your like visual your control system, then like your GitHub Actions or your build process and stuff could run, and and then it would follow your normal deploy process. Looks like this is finishing up, and I'm seeing a whole bunch of questions come in. So here's the question: when you like Ask Fusion stuff, Ask Fusion chat, will Fusion add a custom hidden prompt to the chat, or it simply pass it to the LLM? So that's a good question. Yeah, it's not like just a wrap. So on the, you can kind of see here actually. If I go here, which I didn't mention, you've got this custom instructions tab. You click here, and you can add custom instructions. So I told it for, use our existing design systems and use existing components where it makes sense and stuff. I could have put that in here, and that would have been like a global instruction. You could also use it to mention maybe there's like a quirk with your system, like you always do it this way, or some sort of formatting thing, or like telling it where certain code lives if it doesn't live in a necessarily logical place. But it's really powerful to put all these custom instructions in. But you can also see here, which is what I was kind of getting to, is the AI model that's running under the hood. So Claude 4 is what's running by default. Custom models are an enterprise add-on. But it's not just like a wrap of Claude 4. It doesn't just send stuff straight to it and get it straight back. We have obviously like our model that's built on top of that. So it does run through that first. You don't necessarily see everything it's doing. It tells you like what the steps it's taking, but you don't see the, like, I guess, the logic behind it and stuff. So yeah, there is like a layer, I guess, between your chat and the LLM. It looks like this one's finished. I'm trying to remember what I asked it to do. Oh, slider. So here's the slider. I started off with this dark mode design. It's created the light mode first. Go default. It's all like interactive. Change to dark. All interactive. Different like variants of it. Pretty cool. So that's pretty. We've created what, 3, 4, 5 components in 20 minutes. And you can see how that could be even easier, especially the ones that created without even needing a Figma design. I could just say create a alert, button, card, and form, and just let it go. Oh, that's a good question here. So where do you add .builder rules and agents MD files? So builder rules is added at the root of your repository. So if here, there's custom instructions, you can put them in here. This is like for this, I guess, instance. But you could have a builder rules file, which means that any branch from that repository has these instructions already in it. So you might do a lot of like, or developers or whoever connects it initially might do a lot of tweaking and realize that these rules really help, or these rules are like needed or useful, and they'll put them in the builder rules file, and that will then get used in every single project or branch that comes off that repository. Which actually, I guess, leads to another thing, which is like starter templates and stuff. So you could have like a starter repository, I guess. Maybe it has a storybook in it, maybe it doesn't. And you can use that as a starter template so that when you go to the builder like projects homepage and there's that prompting box, you could select that as your starter repository, type in a prompt, and then create a new repo essentially, or a new project based off that starting point. Just looking for any questions. Sorry, there's a whole bunch to look at here. Question here: can you place tokens inside of Fusion for the padding instead of pixels? Yeah, absolutely. So you could have. We probably have it somewhere in here. It says this variable setup. I used it to do like small tweaks, but you could set it up to use those variables so that like when you do your design, you do it by like set increments and stuff, a bit like you do in Builder. Um, uh, what other ones are there? So someone was asked, can you showcase Smart Export with the VS Code plugin? That's a really good question. So I won't show that right now, but if you go to Figma and go to plugin, Builder.io, you saw I had the Smart Export one. I clicked it, and I took that, copy and pasted it into Fusion. We also have basically a VS Code plugin, which is Fusion running inside of your VS Code instance. That could also be like Cursor or any other like VS Code based editor. Um, and it would work basically the same way. I'm doing it in a browser, but it would be that, but within VS Code. So it's kind of a way of getting it, I guess, tighter to your code base. You're making your code changes, maybe for developers, you're making code changes, and then you don't want to leave VS Code to do stuff. You just want it to be in there at the same time. How are we doing for time? We're good at the moment. So I've not even read the whole thing other than the first words, but likely a loaded question. But is there a builder.io or design system docs configuration you'd recommend for a design system that supports multiple component framework flavors? So is there a builder.io design system docs configuration? That's a good question. I would say different flavors. Like in that case, having examples is going to be the key thing, really. Um, and probably component indexing is going to be pretty powerful there as well. If you have like a monorepo that's got different frameworks within it, definitely doing indexing so that AI can sort that whole mess out and figure out exactly what needs to do what and what goes where, is going to be like a powerful way of doing it. Um, However it is you set it up, as long as you, I guess, give that AI context, and maybe say like create this component in with Angular or whatever, like give it help where it needs it. I wouldn't say there's like a recommended path for that, but it's absolutely possible. Um, so talk about transitioning whole design systems. I need to map an old system to a new system, to a new version. Sorry. What can the tool do to make that less painful? So that's a really good question, and I guess it's kind of what we've been doing here. So when I took that first thing we did, when I took the button that was like an old style, I pulled my Figma design in, and then said update this. I could have or I took that color swatch, the screenshot, and said update this to my brand colors. I told it to do just one component just to save a little bit of time on this demo so I can actually show you it. But I could have said apply this color scheme across all of my components. Most likely it would have created some CSS variables and then like applied those all. But you can absolutely, I guess, completely update or transform your design system using Fusion, and it wouldn't take 100 prompts for 100 components. Like you could do it in like one fell swoop sort of thing. Let's see what other questions we've got. Can you export/import a Figma component with all its states? That's a really good question. I'll see if I can find something here I don't think there's anything in this Figma. I mean, I guess the buttons are kind of an example, where you see a component and it's got a whole bunch of different states. So, you see those huge component sets that's like loads of buttons. It's got the like large, medium, small, the hover state for each one, the disabled state for each one, all the different colors and stuff. You could grab that whole lot, um, export that, give it the context to Fusion, and then it would work like you saw it work here. It created just what it didn't create 8 buttons. It created one button and 8 or even more variants. So yeah, you can absolutely pass in different states. Question here. I've been experimenting with both Builder.io and GitHub Copilot. What are the advantages of Builder.io when you create update components just with the chat, not using Figma export? So the big thing here really is the visual element. You Copilot, it's very like developer focused. You're in your IDE, you're in VS Code or whatever, and you're making those changes. You can obviously see the code change, and you can then like I guess run your application and look at the changes, but you're not getting those changes right here. While it's making those changes, it doesn't have context of the like DOM as it is right now. When you see it say stuff, often it will say like, okay, I can see you're looking at the button component. Or actually something I've not done here is I could have gone to design mode and say I want to change like this. I click that and you can see there it's a selected element. So I'm giving it this context. I'm selecting that element, and it obviously it can obviously see the DOM. and it knows that's what I want to change. Then I say make this change to whatever. And instead of kind of, I guess, describing or like trying to find where something is in the code, you can just make that code directly. Often, especially when repos get bigger and stuff, you might not necessarily know where stuff lives. And so having this visual element is really, really powerful. Obviously, just having context as well of your code base, and then the whole concept of additional repos is really powerful as well. Having like a secondary repo connected for context that you're then using in this one is really, really powerful. We are running a bit short on time. I'm going to keep doing questions. But one thing I did want to mention, I've mentioned component indexing a whole bunch of times throughout this. And you might have been here last week and saw Josh talk about it. But we are running this limited time offer, which I will talk about. So we're offering basically a one-time component indexing run. It's the first 20 teams that sign up. So if you send us your design system and your existing documentation, we can basically run our component indexing CLI on your code base, and we'll provide basically like a zip of AI-ready documentation, insights, and implementation guidance. If your design system is public, just share the link. If it's private, let us know on the form, and we'll send you instructions how to get that over to us. But this will be a one-time run, and if you actually want to fully access it, our design system intelligence going forward, that's an enterprise plan feature, so you'd have to talk to our sales team. But it's something I'd definitely recommend picking us up on because it's a really, really powerful feature. Even if just to get like a really detailed AI-friendly I guess documentation or like index of all of your components, especially the larger design systems, it really makes a huge, huge difference. It kind of takes the guesswork out of the when the AI is working. Right, I'll go. Got what, 5 minutes or so? Do some more questions. That one. Will Fusion be able to apply my existing Figma design tokens and map them to an established component library, such as Mantine, for consistent styling? I'm not familiar with Mantine actually. But yes, when I did that smart export, what actually gets exported? Obviously, when you paste it into Fusion, you see like a nice screenshot and the Fusion export. But what it actually is like a huge blob of code. That represents all the different layers, how they interact with each other, all the Figma like variables, styling tokens, and all of that, and it's passing it to Fusion to use, basically to the AI to use. So it has that context. So if you asked it to map it to your current design system, I'm sure it could. I don't know how Mantine works, but if it's like class-based or there's CSS variables or whatever, I'm sure it would be able to update those. Something kind of cool, actually, kind of related. With that screenshot here, this is kind of a nice visual, I guess. I could say, or even just with the components already in here, I guess document my design system, or like I want a page or like a documentation page in Storybook showing my whole design system, like typography, colors, whatever, font styles. And it will like create like a brand new page. It will document it. It will say these are your colors and have like a big range of them and stuff. So it's kind of, if you don't necessarily already have it documented, it's kind of a cool way to be able to do that in Fusion. I guess done that one. Done that one. That one. Sorry, it's hard to go through all. There's a lot of questions. Quite a lot of them quite similar. Well, oh, here you go. How many AI credits did you use in this demo? I've used as many prompts as I've done, maybe 10. In our current system, it's like one prompt is one credit. Um, we're That's changing when we move out of public beta. I don't know how documented that is, so I won't talk too much about it. But it will go to a more token-based system where a large prompt is more credits than a small prompt. So, but for now, it's probably what 9, 10. Okay, so this is quite a long question. Our developers are currently using Figma to create mockups, then building the React components, and then documenting the components to Storybook. It seems like the logical flow should be Figma, Storybook, React component. I guess that relies on Builder adhering to the established coding standards. What's the best way to bridge this gap? So I understand that correctly. So use Figma to create the mockups. That makes sense. And then you're then building the React component and then documenting. I think that's the logical flow because you obviously need to build it before you put it in Storybook. Well, you need to build it, I guess, in Storybook. In terms of Builder adhering to the established coding standards, as long as you as long as you have any kind of reference here. So with this one, I started intentionally with only what 4, I think it was, or maybe 5 components. I put those in here initially just so that it had an example of my code, like how I wanted it to look, how I wanted it to perform, how I wanted it to function. Um, and then it meant that I knew like confidently when I created this slider, it was going to match the like coding style of the other ones. I was going to adhere to those coding standards. One thing I've not even mentioned because I've been running this locally is there's this like obviously I've mentioned send PR button. Once you send that, it would obviously go to your GitHub or your repo or whatever, and you'd have your your actions running and stuff. But that could be like a linter or something, which could obviously lint for code styles. When stuff fails at the like the build process in GitHub and stuff, the builder bot, so the builder agent, is still running on the repository side once you've connected it, and that can then fix those issues. So the linting might fail, it might not be up to standards or whatever. It could then like push another commit to fix that chain to fix that issue. So it does it as long as there's example code, like any AI thing really. As long as there's like an example to go off, then it will like follow your coding standards pretty tightly. Um, can you demonstrate how to reuse this repo in another project and build a new feature using its components? Ideally starting from a Figma design. So can you demonstrate how to reuse this repo? Um, as I mentioned, I could take this repository now, like push the changes that I've done and stuff, so it's all live, and then use that as like a starter template. I could also use it as an additional one. So I've now like, I mean, this actually is, you can't see it, but this Storybook is actually within part of a wider application. If you look at the files, you can see I've got the Storybook, but I also have source and I have um, like an app, an index and stuff like that. So it's actually just a Vite and React application beneath this. Um, I could now use these components we have in the code base and start building out the page. So say like create a home page using my components and my styling, put a product card in there, put whatever, a button, and start building out using what we've built here. I think that's basically us at time. Um, as mentioned, this one's been recorded, so that's going to get sent to anyone who's attended. And yeah, please don't forget this offer here. If you're interested, please contact us. Well, please go to this link. And I really hope this was valuable. Um, yeah, and have a great day and evening, everyone. Thank you.